evening, and welcome to the public meeting of the Halton District School Board for Wednesday, September 4th, 2019. This is the first regular board meeting of the 2019-2020 school year. At this moment, I'd like to remind everyone that this meeting is video voice recorded and live streamed from the hdsb.ca website, and I would also like you to ask that you turn all of your devices to silent mode. Trustee Amos is attending this evening by phone, and I'd like to just take a moment to welcome back Kevin Raposo from a year away from us. He's our tech. Okay, so this evening, Olivia Lao, student trustee-elect, will be honoring the land.
Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Attawandaron, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honor and respect the four directions, land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walked before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of possible conflict of interest? Seeing none. So next, we are up to the agenda, and we need to make an addition to the agenda, and that is the swearing in of the student trustees. This will occur at 2.3.1, which is going to just push the two other presentations down a notch. So could I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Trustee Daniele, seconded by Trustee Gray. Thank you. Is there any discussion on the agenda this evening? Okay, seeing none. All in favor? You can vote now. So Trustee Amos, what say you? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have no delegations this evening, so we are up to our presentations, and the first is the swearing in of the student trustees. So So first, I'd like to call up Matthew Burns to the front here.
No, I don't read anything. He reads it. Up here, my good friend, I was going to call you my boy, but you're now trustee. Oh. Matthew, so this is the oath of office for student trustees declaration, and you read through all of this, I believe, right? Yep, you read through everything, so where you go.
I, Matthew Burns, do solemnly declare that, in accordance with the Education Act, related legislation, and board policies and procedures, I will truly, faithfully, impartially, and to the best of my ability, execute the office of student trustee. In my role as student trustee, I will comply with freedom of information and protection of personal privacy and conflict of interest legislation, recognizing the importance of maintaining the confidentiality of the board with regard to matters that are dealt with in closed session, and declare not to divulge any information of the contents of any material shared with trustees in closed meetings, and that I am not disqualified under any requirement from being a student trustee member of the Halton District School Board.
Okay, and then we'll sign. So you go first, Matthew, then Andrea and I will sign. do it one at a time, since we already started that way.
You need to fill your name in on one of those. There we go.
Congratulations, Matthew. I'll say something at the end. Oh, are you doing the microphone?
Okay.
Where's that second copy for you, Olivia? Where'd the second copy go for Olivia?
We only have one sheet.
Oh, this is the old sheet. What did I do with the other ones? Ah. Couldn't organize a two-card funeral. Okay, Olivia, this is the oath of the office for student trustee declaration. So face the camera, and you take the microphone and you read all that. I'll hold your pen.
Thanks. I, Olivia Lao, do solemnly declare that in accordance with the Education Act, related legislation, and board policies and procedures, I will truly, faithfully, impartially, and to the best of my ability execute the office of student trustee. In my role as student trustee, I will comply with freedom of information and protection of personal privacy and conflict of interest legislation, recognizing the importance of maintaining the confidentiality of the board with regard to matters that are dealt with in closed session, and declare not to divulge any information of the contents of any materials shared with trustees in closed meetings, and that I am not disqualified under any requirement from being a student trustee member of the Halton District School Board.
Thank you, Olivia. Now you sign first. And sign them both this time. Put your name there. Sign a second. Sign a second. Might as well do it all at once.
Nice pen.
Oh, when I got one of my days.
Yeah.
Turn around. Congratulations, Olivia.
Thank you.
And now, we'll do a whole picture with everybody, but the chair of the board is going to say a few words first.
Ooh, a microphone. Congratulations to you both. Student trustee is such an important position to have in our board. You represent the voice of 65,000 students. It is a big responsibility, and I know that you both are very excited about that, but maybe have a little bit of jitters about that. But we all believe that you're going to do a fantastic job, and we're looking forward to hearing your reports at our board meetings and hearing the feedback from your student senate meetings as well. That information is very valuable for us to be able to make the decisions that affect the students of our board. So thank you so much for putting your names forward, and congratulations on being elected, and congratulations on your swearing in this evening.
You two should be in it too. Just well, I think
we
the
can
other
do-
trustees is some. Let's do this.
Kevin, can you dim the background? or put up something that looks Halton board-like? Oh.
And now I think there should be a picture with all trustees and the student trustees. I don't know. It's up to you guys. So you go to the, you two go in the center at the front. You two go to the center at the front. I'll go to the back. Tracy, there's a spot right here. Are you good?
Good. You can see me. I can see you.
Mine's a lot quicker at this than you.
She's way better. Oh, I lost the camera. My fingers are the same. One more here, I'll just use.
Yes.
Anyone look closer up? One second. Last one. Very demanding group.
And your pen.
I think this might still be on, I'm not sure.
I thought when you were going to say to begin it, that you were truth and I'll stand behind it.
Okay, so that was fun. Now we are up to 2.3.2. We're having a few technical issues, so I'm going to talk really slowly. Burlington PAR implementation update by Superintendent Blackwell.
So I will start through the chair. For those of you that are new, specifically our new student trustees and also the community members that may be new to Burlington High Schools, I did come and present to the board in May, so I'm just going to give you a little bit of an update as to where we are and what we're going to be doing between now and the end of the year. So over the summer, thanks to the communications department, I've updated, we have a PAR website that shows the implementation process for the integration of 2 high schools coming, or actually 3 high schools coming this year. And what I've done is over the summer created a video that is replaced the stuff that we've done in the past and then talked about the currency. So this is available on our board website, and I would encourage families that are interested in what the process is moving forward to take a look. And as you'll see in the red row, this year, we have the iSTEM program implementation, so the first year of iSTEM. We have the Accelerated Learning Program beginning at Burlington Central, and we also have Essential Program beginning, and I'll talk to that in a few minutes. In terms of the integration, we have Robert Bateman closing at the end of the 2019-2020 school year. And we're happy to report that in this school year, the work that we've done with OSSTF and our Human Resources Department, we have shared staff at both Robert Bateman and Nelson and Robert Bateman and Burlington Central. We actually have, and I have the numbers, so we have teachers that will be teaching at both sites. We have 9 that are shared between Bateman and Nelson, and we have 3 that are shared between Bateman and Central. We also have 2 full-time staff that have moved from Bateman to Nelson and Bateman to Central. So that's going to be very helpful in this process of supporting students in transitions and then bringing staff into that fold. We also have continued opportunities for students, and we have staff that will continue to work together. And when I say working together as staff, sometimes there'll be opportunities for all 3 schools, and we will continue to have opportunities for 2 schools to work together. And then we have school councils. And I want to acknowledge the work of our principals at these 3 schools for selecting the dates to support families in attending as many of the council meetings as they'd like. So I may be a parent at Robert Bateman, my child may be moving to Burlington Central, I want to attend both school council meetings, and so the schools have strategically scheduled those. And they are posted at the school website, and this will also be posted. The integration committees, they will be formed this year, and our integration committees, for those of you that were here for the closure of Lester B. Pearson, the integration committees by board, our board process is that occurs after the school council elections. So the dates are there. The committees include trustees, principals, staff from both schools, students from both schools, parents from both schools, and as we recognized in the Pearson MM integration, one of the things that we did was we invited SEAC representation. We also invited our union partners to attend those meetings, and we will reach out to them again and include them in the committee work. So those are the dates, and that work will be starting shortly. Schools will be sending out communication. Some schools are already communicating to their staff in staff meetings. I know that at Nelson, Mr. Daigneault talked about it in assemblies yesterday as opportunities for students. So that will be upcoming, and schools will be communicating that. Construction updates. We have 3 construction updates related to the PAR. I know that there are many more from our facilities department. But the letters, and I don't expect that you can read the content of the letters, but schools will continue to keep their communities informed as to the progress of construction. I know that Mr. Daigneault and at MM Robinson, Ms. Proto shared information with the school communities as to what was happening over the summer, and that work continues. And if you drive by MM Robinson, you'll see that the construction at the front of the school. And if you're driving by Nelson, you'll see the new parking lot, and you may not see the electrical work that was done, but there was a lot of work done on interior pieces over the summer. So that will continue, and at the top is one of the new iSTEM spaces. At our next opportunity, I will bring actual pictures with furniture in the room, and it will look good, and kids. The iSTEM launch, so as I mentioned, that program started yesterday. We're really excited. I wanted to point out, since the last time I was here, that in June, on a PD day, all of the students that were coming into iSTEM had the opportunity to spend a half day at Aldershot. In July, the staff at Aldershot that's teaching the program were involved in an opportunity to connect with Mohawk, and there's some exciting work that will be happening with Mohawk. In August, the staff at the bottom left corner were planning over the summer, and in the middle, I'll bring that back with more detail. They've created a framework for a year at a glance, and that will be shared with families and also used to promote over the next little bit as students determine whether or not they'd like to apply for iSTEM for next year. And I want to acknowledge the work of our communications department for getting that ready to go out tomorrow. And then, yes, that was a picture from yesterday. So that's the first day of iSTEM and all the students together. So in that program, the nice thing about it is that you have 4 teachers that are teaching all of the kids for the afternoon all year long. So the kids will have an opportunity to work with multiple groups, but I'll let them tell you. I don't want to ruin their thunder. And then in iSTEM, you may recall last year we talked about working with McMaster University. So every student in iSTEM will be attending 2 lectures, actual first-year lectures in engineering in September. As you know, last year we shared at the PIC conference. That will continue. There's an information evening that will be posted, the date finalized for November. There will be an iSTEM public exhibition, so we will have students being able to display some of the work that they're doing, and then they're going to be working on a symposium for February. On top of that, they're going to be involved in working inside of the Mohawk Labs, specifically their new, I think it was about a $2.7 million lab with the latest in AR/VR technology. IoT is Internet of Things, and then you can read the rest. But that will be really exciting for our students to be exposed to. And in terms of the program department, which has been helpful in getting us started this year, we have some new grade 9 pieces. So at MM Robinson and Nelson, the Essential program has started yesterday, and the LEAP program. And actually last year, the 2 people that supported the LEAP program and the Essential program in our board are actually in the schools teaching that this year. So that's exciting. The Accelerated Learning program started at Burlington Central yesterday with approximately 60 students. And then, as I just mentioned, iSTEM has started. One of the things, when the decision was made, the decisions made at this table were in June of 2017. And at the time, kids that are now in grade 8 were in grade 5. So many of those parents may not have been paying attention, or it may not have seemed relevant to them at the time as to the decisions at this table. Every grade 8 student will be receiving a letter from their school that is personalized as to where their program will be offered. So English program, it will show the feeder school, where would you go to for English, where would you go to for French immersion, where would you go to if you're in a CPP program or a community pathway program. It will provide that information for families to keep them in the loop early on, because as we know, program options become, or school options, grade 9 information evenings start to run in November. And then communication, we will continue to communicate in as many ways as possible. We know that secondary schools, principals in their secondary schools are very key in communicating to their communities, rather than parents looking to the board website on a regular basis to see what's happening. So that's our, those principals will be amazing at continuing that. And we've learned a lot in terms of communication from the last round, not only in terms of communication, but in every aspect of that process. So we've been tapping into those principles as well. This website will continue to be updated, and every second month we'll be at the board meeting, and hopefully it won't be me here. It will be, there's lots going on, so you'll hear from students and staff from many of the programs that are happening. So that's the whirlwind. That's where we are since May. Be happy to take any questions.
Trustee Gray.
Thank you very much. I noted that in your information about Aldershot, that there are 4 teachers teaching all the kids all year long in the afternoon. I'm just wondering what the uptake was into the Aldershot program, the numbers.
So as of yesterday, we have 115 students.
And is that what we anticipated, or more so then?
We were hoping for 60.
Lovely.
Yes.
Through you, Chair Drabantz, to, in addition to Superintendent Blackwell's answer, Trustee Gray, if you'll recall during the PAR process, this board took a leap of faith and a belief in the staff of this board around creating some thematic approach at Aldershot High School. It was a bit of an unknown, and yeah, we're only 2 days into it, 3 days, so it's a wee bit difficult to say how successful it is yet, but the numbers itself would indicate that this board made a significant decision to support many kids in Burlington and in particular at Aldershot High School. So as director, I'm grateful and proud of the work and the decision you made, and thankful that you put the support and confidence in our staff. So,
Trustee Collard.
Thank you. I'd like to ask about the renovations at Nelson. I've heard from some of the people that neighbor Nelson High School that the renovations are not at the point where they thought they would be with 1 year to go. And so I'm not sure if this goes to the director, but if I could just get an update on the status of the renovations.
Through you, Chair Drabens, to Trustee Collard. I will start, and Superintendent Blackwell and Superintendent Puccetti will weigh in as to where we are. We are still awaiting ministry approval or ministerial approval around the addition and some of the big monies that the province has approved. And it's no secret that we have been working very closely with the ministry in providing all sorts of information and updates and clarifications for them. We have submitted all of those, and they have that. And it is our belief that we have met all the requirements, and we are awaiting a signature, or maybe perhaps more than one signature. It is, I would be not, it seems to be an inordinate time that it's taking. And from a board's perspective, we've done everything necessary for this to be done, and now we need approval. Given that the provincial climate has changed and the provincial priorities may have changed somewhat, and it's a new government, and they have to do their due diligence and so on, but it is taking longer than approvals in previous years that it would take. So there is a delay. We're a little frustrated and concerned about this delay as well in terms of the addition. However, having said that, there is work going on, and I don't know whether it be Superintendent Puccetti or Blackwell that will describe the work that's going on, because we changed the way we were staging work so that we could get to work on stuff. But the big money and the big additions, we're still waiting approval, and it's at least it's been at least 18 months we've been working on this. So
I'll start, and maybe if I miss anything, I'll pass it off to Superintendent Puccetti. One of the little letter pictures that I showed, in May of last year, Nelson communicated the work that would be done in phase 1, and it was work that you're not going to see a lot of things. Like there's an electrical box out back. There was a huge electrical upgrade over the summer, the parking lot, the landscaping. Inside the healthcare SHISM room has been done. So all of the commitments to phase 1 have been started and are almost finished. We also have the board approved capital renewal dollars last year to start to ensure that the community pathway program area was ready to go, as we had promised in June of 2017. So that students would have access to that piece. And that is not related to ministry funding, and that plan is underway. I don't know if Superintendent Puccetti wants to add.
Yes, thank you. Just to say that we've also applied for all the building permits for the additions and the other renovations. So as soon as we are given the approval to proceed with the additions, we have that city approval ready to go.
May I follow up? So what happens if we don't get the approval, A, and does it cost us any money to have to speed things up at a certain point in time that we didn't get money for?
Through your Chair Drabens to Trustee Collard, at this point, we are still, we believe, okay. We have not developed a contingency plan as of yet, because we do not think it is necessary yet. But we are getting closer to having to develop some kind of contingency plan. We believe that the construction can be completed on time, and if it is not completed on time, it will be completed sufficiently that students will be all able to go to Nelson. However, that's at this point in time when it's taken several months. It has been several months, and we still don't have approval. We don't know if it'll be several months more or what. So at some point, we may be coming back to the board. As for the money, we also don't anticipate spending any more money, but that would depend whether we have to develop a contingency plan. So at this point, it's fairly safe to say that we believe that we will be able to make a complete transition successfully for the Bateman students moving to Nelson. But we're getting, I would say, fairly close to having to figure out if that is a realistic goal or not. So,
Thank you. Could I ask that we get more than monthly updates on the status of the Nelson renovations? Like, could we have a status update at every meeting, if warranted?
Through you, Chair Drabens, to Trustee Collard and all trustees, yeah, that would be no problem. I think we could leave it in. Do you want it as an item for us to bring forward, or do it in trustee comments and questions? Either way is fine, and we can address them. We'll be ready.
Okay, so there are no more questions on that topic. Thank you very much. Next is a presentation by Associate Director Bogue, Seekers Summer Program Pilot. Welcome to the hot seat. And welcome System Principal White and Principal Taylor. Good to see you both.
So thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to trustees, I'd like to introduce a couple of people here beside me. Darlene White is our System Principal for Student Success and works out of the Secondary Program Department. And Andrew Taylor is our Principal of Gary Allen, and Gary Allen also is responsible for continuing education as well as a variety of other things. So we wanted to, I think trustees recall, we're not doing the big summer school report any longer, but we did want to highlight a program from this past summer, and this is a new program. It's called Seekers. It was a joint venture between our program department and our continuing education, which runs out of Gary Allen High School. And we wanted to share it for a couple of reasons, actually 3 reasons. First, it's new. Secondly, it really demonstrates our ability to be innovative and creative and meet a need of a very specific group of students. And I won't steal the thunder for these two. They'll talk about the particular kids that we targeted here. And thirdly, it also demonstrates our ability to respond to a system need. And trustees may recall that last year during the budget season, there was lots of commentary around the value of outdoor and experiential education. And this really demonstrates our responsiveness as we heard some of the conversations. And this was an opportunity to try something during the summer. We sometimes have more flexibility during summer school and night school on a Con Ed register than in day school. So we wanted to share that with trustees as well. So I'm going to turn things over to our folks here who really are our experts. And at the end, we'll be happy to respond to any questions that you might have. I don't know who's...
Thank you, David. Mr. Bogue, Associate Director Bogue. I want to make sure I got that right. So we just wanted to remind you that the Seekers program was a joint opportunity between the program department and the continuing education that Andrea represents here today. And the rationale for the program really was as a transition program that would be very engaging for students transitioning between grade 8 and to grade 9. And these are specifically students who have been identified as in risk. And the whole idea was to give them an opportunity to become more confident as they're moving into high school and to give them an opportunity for a reach ahead credit so that those students in day 2 of high school today actually have a credit under their belt, which is, I think, really makes them feel great. The idea was that there would be a focus on experiential learning as well as Indigenous cultures of a local nature, and students would be doing a lot of work on outdoor education. And in fact, that is the credit that they received, which is a grade 9 outdoor education credit. And I think Andrea will tell you a few more details.
Thank you, Darlene. So putting this together, I was lucky enough to interview a teacher, Corey Gustafson, who actually had an AQ in outdoor experiential ed, which was amazing. And in speaking with him and in collaborating with Rebecca Richardson out of secondary programs, we were able to build a framework and looking at a holistic approach, because PAD 101 is called Healthy Living and Outdoor Activities. So looking at physical health, mental health, emotional health, and spiritual health. So that was sort of our look at that. And then, so we created a 4-week program basically that Corey could work on with the students, and so meeting those curriculum needs, what carried through living skills, fitness and safety every day. They looked at that, and then every week, as you can see, they built in a excursion. So they kept it local the first week, then off to Hilton Falls, then off to Crawford Lake, where they did Indigenous studies that he wove through the whole piece. And then Kelso Adventure, where they did a little bit more as they had developed relationships with each other. So these were students that were coming more from our Halton Hills area and would be attending into Acton, Georgetown, and Milton. Students that were identified by their principals as students who would benefit from such an engaging opportunity. So we did have students with anxieties. And what was really nice to see is that they came out of their shells and actually connected with each other. And I will be tracking them at their high schools to see how they do. So I do have their names. I do know their home high schools, and we'll follow them to see how they do. So we had great success with this layout of the curriculum. So the feedback from them, we'll just quickly go through this. There was a lot of feedback that they gave, but I just pulled some of the highlights. We learned how to cope positively to maintain mental health and well-being. So Corey did a really good job at working with them and pacing through the day, the weeks, and the month to bring out the best in each of them. And they had to make healthy choices. He was amazed that they were so interested in eating healthy and doing activities that were healthy. And they really focused in that with their journal work as well. He didn't know that they knew what pangender was, so he learned something new from them. And then they went off to Crawford Lake, and they had not been there. Some of them did not know really had ever been there, so they had learned that, and they talked about that back at the classroom. They didn't mind walking in the rain. They didn't mind the old mill. They would sit and reflect and have that quiet time and settle their minds and talk about it when they got back. The relevance piece was, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So they really worked on self-regulation when you really wanted to say what was going on in your mind, but maybe that's not the right time to do that. The importance of teamwork, skills and leadership that they developed, and then again, living a healthy life was really the important piece for them. So that's really a quick piece. All the students that were able to make it through, they all got 100% graduation, got their credit to go on to high school. They saw improvement. Some started slow, and then they understood the importance of getting credits at high school, the importance of being there every day. So then we did a video, in which you probably have seen on the spotlight, but we'll go to that. I think if you click on it.
Do we have time for the video?
It's about 2 minutes. You may have seen it, but we'll quickly highlight them. Okay.
They have a portion of the program that's a nutrition part. They also learn about mental health. We're going to be taking 3 major trips, one to Hilton Falls, one to Crawford Lake, and then another to Kelso, where they'll do various hiking and other activities, including some journaling. They are able to get a credit early on before they get into high school. It's a nice transition. It's kind of flipping the classroom to outdoor experiential education. It gives them opportunities to make friends and connections as they're going into high school. And it's just kind of about getting outdoors and being active and having a healthy lifestyle and well-being.
As I moved from elementary school to high school, this program has helped me be more confident and succeed in grade 9.
Any questions?
Oh, sorry. So the success, I hope you can see that through the video and through the enthusiasm of my colleagues up here. We will be looking at this, doing some additional tweaking and this was a pilot just in the north this summer, but our plan would be to try to run this in a number of communities this summer, for that specific profile of student. And these ladies would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Director Miller, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, through you, Chair Drabens, to all trustees, I really want to congratulate and thank Principals Taylor, White, and Associate Director Bogue. The genesis of this idea was a little while ago, but it was only really put together pretty quickly in the spring. And the trustees around this table, I don't have to remind you that we were under pressure around a cancellation of a particular program. This wasn't in response to that, but it's part of our response to that in terms of the Bronte Creek project. And I think the three people up there, in particularly the two principals, worked pretty diligently to put this together. And by all accounts, it's really successful. And we've got some students coming into grade 9 now who might not have been looking forward to going to grade 9, who have already arrived with a credit. Our hope is to be able to expand this to all areas of the board, and that's what we're step number 2. As an aside, Associate Director Bogue and I met with the Friends of Bronte Creek, and we spoke about this to them, and they were quite pleased at our response in terms of that and enthusiastic about this program. Then they had lots of questions. They wanted us to expand it all over the place and do all sorts of things, which is great, but realistically that would be a challenge. But certainly expanding to the regions is good. So. Anyway, those are my comments. Thanks.
Okay, we have a few speakers on the speakers list. Trustee Collard.
Thank you. Through you to the presenters. Congratulations. It looks like a great program and is something that I would have enjoyed when I was in high school. I was wondering if we had any information on, well, of course, the number of students, but on the cost of the program, because one of the reasons that we had to cancel Bronte Creek was due to cost, and I'm hopeful that this program is sustainable for us to increase in numbers in future years. And so if I could get the number of students and the cost.
Because it's a continuing education program through the summer school, we get funding based on the attendance. So it actually brings in some revenue, and then we offset that with transportation costs. So one of the things that we realized at the very last moment is in summer school, we only run transportation from Acton to Georgetown for the secondary school students. And then we realized we're bringing in students from Brookville, which is Milton. And we're like, oh my gosh, how are we going to get them up to Ethel Gardner? Because it was running out of that site in Georgetown. And so we had to put that in place. So we did have a transportation cost. The salary of the teacher, but that's usually offset by the revenue that comes in through the funding for the attendance of the students. The T-shirts, which I put in place basically as a safety issue when they're out on their hikes. We know where our kids are. And water bottles for them for health. It was minimal. So we don't have the actual figures in right now, but eventually if you're interested, we could take a look at that. But it actually brings in funding through the continuing ed.
That's excellent. And the number of students?
That finished, we're about 8. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just going to answer as well that the program department was able to, at very minimal cost, provide supplies and equipment and that sort of thing that we already had. So it wasn't any extra.
And actually, I should clarify that to do the trips, that money did come out of secondary programs. So Rebecca Richardson was able to look at her envelope of money, and that was allowing us to get the buses for the excursions.
Trustee Gray.
Thank you very much through the chair. To Principal Taylor, hearing that you're going to track the seekers through their high school, I wonder if you'd be tracking them early on in this first semester to see how their transition has taken. And also hearing that 8 finished, I'm thinking that others didn't finish. Would we be doing any kind of follow-up with those that did not complete the program? And secondly, this is the type of program that is just so needed in our schools, and I'm very hopeful that we could be seeing a replication of this program as it grows and changes, as we know that we have students that have the needs that are being met by a program such as this.
So to go through that, we had, because it happened so quickly and had to turn around very quickly for the elementary principals to identify students, because a number of students had already identified reach ahead credits through the ones that have already been in place, like NAC and GLD. And so we didn't get a whole lot, actually. I only had about 12. And then a couple, ones decided they were going to go on vacation, so if you can't commit for the full 4 weeks, we lost that. There was a transportation issue that they didn't know that the bus wasn't coming right to their rural setting, so they couldn't get them to Brookville to be picked up. Another one ended up being an inappropriate selection because of their needs. It just didn't fit for them. And the other one was a personal piece. So there's things that we would look at to accommodate around for that. Around their transition, I've already penning out conversations or emails to the home principals to track. Like, I don't want to be big sister over all of them, but it's just to extend a communication to them to say that we want to see how they're doing. Because it's a small cohort, we can follow pretty easily.
Okay, Trustee Shuttleworth.
Thank you. I've kind of been wavering whether to ask this now or not, but I'm going to. First of all, to the presenters, I just wanted to say thank you. I think that the way you show the caring umbrella that comes from a project, I just think it's really great, and I really look forward to hearing how those students do as they go forward. My second question is through the chair to the director. And I just have a question because you mentioned meeting with the Bronte Creek project, and I was just wondering sort of how that meeting went.
Through you, Chair Drabens, to Trustee Shuttleworth, Associate Director Bogue and I had met with them, but this was after Associate Director Bogue, myself, Principal Taylor, Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons, and Superintendent Salmini had met to develop some, I wouldn't want to say alternatives to Bronte Creek, but addressing experiential education and environmental education. And we developed, well, I shouldn't say we, they developed 4 kind of vehicles to acquire both, do experiential and environmental education. Associate Director Bogue and I met with the Bronte Creek Project. We showed them those 4, and we talked about the Seekers program, and they were quite enthusiastic about the work we had done and what we were trying to do. And I think they fully grasped our dilemma, as Trustee Collard's already said, in terms of the cost of the Bronte Creek. But we also talked about the equity of it. It was primarily a Burlington program, and we're a big board. And so we had, when we presented to trustees and you voted, well, you didn't vote it, but in terms of the budget, it was 2 issues. It was cost and equity. And we were showing them how we were trying to achieve equity. One of the things that they really wanted to maintain was the Earth Keepers program, because that is an equitable program around the board. And we had 3 of the 4 all had ways to maintain the Earth Keepers. So I'll turn it over to Principal Taylor at this point, because we don't have the definitive answer yet, but I'm sure it's going to be a hybrid of some of those that we come in. The Bronte Creek people, they asked David, Associate Director Bogue and I, that they said, would we be prepared if they went away and worked on ideas and all that stuff to hear from them? And we said, yeah, go, if you want to present something to us or give something to us, later on in the school year. Not in a board meeting, but we would be prepared to take a look at that and explore the possibilities with Principal Taylor and Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons. So I don't know, do you want to talk about those four?
What was the question, actually?
Just about those four things that we had come up around experiential and environmental ed that we had looked at. It's a combination of, David can probably talk about it.
I will pass it over to Associate Director David Bowe.
We did explore 4 different possibilities, and they were sort of at different levels of intensity, if you will. One being offering more opportunities for kids in general right across all grades. So, I mean, and we do that now, but we could look at, what happens in grade 9, what happens in grade 10, what happens in grade 3. So that was sort of the one level. Something more like a Bronte Creek at the other level would be a school, an individual school that offers a 4-credit package, for example, like Bronte Creek, but not out at Citra Bean. And there are examples of this where this happens in other boards, and it's a program that's offered out of a high school, typically for the students in that school. And then there was some things that were sort of in the middle. And so we talked about ways to provide leadership opportunities to high school kids. For example, a leadership class, and those run in just about every high school. I think every high school I've ever been in has a leadership class, and they often take on different projects or a themed approach in terms of supporting leadership activities for usually kids in their school, but they might take on an environmental or an outdoor kind of theme and could work with their feeder school kids to do the Earth Keepers. So they would, be trained in terms of some of the outdoor ed pieces. And we talked about the potential of hiring an outdoor educator to facilitate that. And they could work with their feeder schools to do the Earth Keepers. Or an alternative of that would be to use co-op students. And often we have co-op kids going out to all over the place. So those kids that had an interest in outdoor education or environmental education might go to the North Ed Center, for example, and work with an outdoor ed expert to be trained and then deliver Earth Keepers in the north one semester, and then potentially do that out of New Street in the south, that sort of thing. And we would use all of our local green spaces, and we're loaded with green space in Halton. We're very fortunate. Oakville's a little light, but everywhere else there's a ton of parks and places that we could get kids involved in. So we're just sort of looking at options right now, but they seem to be quite impressed with that slate of options, and we've got a little bit more work to do still. Sure.
I'm just going to add so that you understand all of the sort of the vehicles by which it would be done. So Gary Allen with alternative ed and continuing ed, I would be continuing to look to enhance it at summer school. And in an alternative ed in our 4 campuses, threading it through there. So if a student accesses that through the day school. So school programs, most definitely looking at Earth Keepers from school programs piece from K to 12 is awesome, but also because we have alternative ed and continuing ed, we can even look at night school possibly. So there's a lot of opportunities the boards can access.
Okay, there are no more speakers on the speakers list. Oh, actually, go ahead, Trustee Lau.
Hi, I just wanted to make a quick comment. I did this course just last semester for grade 11 in my school. And I just wanted to say it was an amazing course and everything we did was just so amazing. One of my questions was, how much did the kids have to pay to attend this program?
Nothing. No. This being PAD 101, so like there's a 201, there's an outdoor course, outdoor ed course, in a sense, or outdoor activities course in each grade. But for a summer school, it would have been no cost for them at all. We're not doing a huge overnight. We're using our local green space because one of the focus is for the students and families to know what is in their own backyard. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks.
Okay, so there are no more speakers. Thank you very much for the excellent presentation. We really appreciate the work that you're doing to help our students. Okay, so we are now up to our consent agenda items. So I'm going to put motion on the floor. Be it resolved that the Halton District School Board approve the consent agenda action items and receive the information items for September 4th, 2019. Moved by Trustee Gray, seconded by Trustee Shuttleworth. Okay, is there any discussion at all on the consent agenda action items or information items? Okay, seeing none, we'll just get voting on that. Okay, all those in favor. Trustee Amos, how say you?
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, now we are up to ratification action items. Vice Chair Al Harrison, do we have any business from private session that requires approval?
Not this evening, thanks.
Thank you very much. And now we're up to action items for September 4th. There are no action items for this evening. So we will move on to communications to the board. Now, at this point, we normally have the student trustee reports. So I understand that there is one, and I'm going to give you the floor, our new student trustees.
Through you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Director Miller, Chair Grabentz, fellow trustees and superintendents. Matthew and I are extremely excited to begin our term, and we would first like to say thank you for everyone for their warm welcome tonight and everyone who has helped us transition into our roles as smoothly as possible. For this report, I will be covering what Matthew and I have done so far in the summer, and then I'll pass it off to him to cover more about the future endeavors and some exciting plans for our term. So over the summer, Matthew and I got started right away and updated the HDSB Student Senate website, got the login for the Student Senate Instagram, and we've already prepared the letter that will be sent out to all of the principals as soon as possible. This letter will outline how principals select their student senators, and it will provide them with information and resources that they can pass on to their chosen senator. In terms of logistics, we plan to have our Senate meetings right here in the J.W. Singleton Center, and our first planned Senate meeting will be on the last Tuesday of this month, so September 24th. Any trustees are welcome to come if they're available. Similar to the past years, Matthew and I have decided to keep our Senate meetings from 6 to 7 p.m. as the elementary session, and then have 7 to 8 as the joint session with all senators, and then conclude our secondary session from 8 to 9 p.m. I would like to finally emphasize that one of our main goals this year is to increase the exposure of the Senate to the general student body and continue to make Student Senate a place where senators can bring forth their concerns and ideas. Matthew and I will do everything in our power to make sure that student voice is respectfully brought to the board table in an accurate way that reflects the opinions of the student body. Now I'll pass it on to Trustee Burns.
Last year, a Student Senate committee reviewed the current student trustee election policy and presented a list of suggested amendments to our current system, while also considering the provincial mandate regarding the election of student trustees. In the coming weeks, Olivia and I will look through their suggestions and continue to speak with other boards to determine the system that not only engages the most students, but provides a fair window of time for candidates to gain suitable exposure before the election proper. On the topic of engaging more students in Senate affairs, Olivia and I are doing some research on how to engage more students from our northern regions. Currently, we've been considering the possibility of reaching out to individual principals from schools that have not yet sent student senators in the past, and we are speaking with former student trustees and northern regional directors on how to increase engagement from student senators and the general student body from that area. In regard to the structure of the Student Senate from last year, Olivia and I plan to continue the precedent set by our predecessors in the Student Senate by adhering to our responsibilities as student trustees outlined not only by the Board of Trustees, but also in the Student Senate policy, while also continuing the formality of our processes. Executive positions within the Student Senate can be expected to be brought over from the previous year, while Olivia and I discuss possible expansions of responsibilities in the roles of communications and public relations, as well as Northern Regional Representative.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for your report.
First one.
Yeah, first one. Well done.
That's the only clap we'll get.
Okay, now we're up to action items for September 18th. We have no action items, but we've also, just as a note, we've adopted a schedule of having most items only come once to our board table with the ability to defer to the next meeting as requested. So I was wondering, do we need to append our bylaw appendix at all to reflect that? Or do we just keep the space here for those items that boundary reviews and that sort of thing that would show up? Okay. Just Trustee Collard.
Since there are some occasions that we will have them coming back, I think it's important to keep it there. It's just going to be a null item until required.
Okay, that's good to know. I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that we'll have a lot of null items. Oh, Vice Chair Al Harrison.
No worries. Through you, Madam Chair, I wondered, though, whether we should, as a reminder of which items are which, just append that list somewhere. Is it on the website? Okay, including ourselves, I guess, since it's new. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so that's good. Next we're up to notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion? Seeing none. Okay, director's report. Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Chair Drabantz, and I do apologize that it's quite a lengthy director's report this evening, but at the beginning of the school year, there's many items, and I contemplated putting some of them in the director's weekly that I write to you, but I think almost all of them have a public interest, and the public doesn't get the director's weekly, but this for here. So hopefully we'll have a more truncated director's report as we go forward, and I'm going to be calling on a number of superintendents around to address. So the first one is, as you know, the province introduced or reintroduced, however you want to characterize it, a new health and phys ed curriculum, and one of the topics of conversation was exemptions. So we're working through that, but I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Salmini to address what's in there.
So the good news is the newly released health and physical education curriculum is not drastically different from the 2015 curriculum. So we do have our school programs department working on any updates to support teachers in the implementation of this curriculum and updating the family letters that are going home. The second piece, and I should say, and that curriculum doesn't get taught until later in the year, the strand, so that there is time for all of this to happen so that teachers are prepared. The second piece is that we are working on updating our admin procedure on possibility for exemptions to the curriculum. And currently we are reading that there are 3 different things that can happen in terms of supervision of students during an exemption. And so these are the pieces that we're working out to see how that will work in terms of availability of staff to supervise students or an option for students to go home or stay in a class while particular content is being taught, working on something else. So we are looking to see what is happening across the province and working on updating that. And it's the end of November when we need to have that admin procedure updated.
Okay, seeing no questions, I have a question. And that is, because we had the year of the sort of retro physical health and education, and things have kind of moved around, there will be gaps. Like I know in my own children, there will be gaps, and I'm afraid that some of those gaps are quite important. And is there a plan to somehow fill those gaps, or at least provide information to parents so that they might be able to fill some of those gaps? I'll just let you answer.
So that is a very good point. Part of what they're doing is looking at what they presented teachers with last year, where they did a comparison of what was and what is what was in the interim curriculum. And so now they're looking at this third piece, so what has come out now. And so what we can ask them to do is to identify some gaps for teachers, perhaps that they could fill in the current year.
Okay, thank you. Because I know part about gender happened in grade 6, and now it's moved to grade 8. So those grade 6s have already got that information, but they'll be missing other things. So, yeah.
So I would just add to that I'd be more concerned about something that's totally missed than something that's revisited, because often when something is introduced in the curriculum in one grade, it builds upon in subsequent grades. So if they got it in grade 6 and it's revisited in grade 8, that isn't that much of a concern because it happens anyway. It would be more if something was totally missed.
Okay, yeah. Yes, absolutely. Okay, Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you, through the chair, to Superintendent Salmini. I'm wondering if you could kind of remind us around the table, up to now, how were exemptions handled in the schools, and what do you think the nuances and the difference are going to mean for parents? Because I think they're very interested in sort of understanding how that will look different.
Through the chair to Trustee Reynolds, I think the most significant change will be looking at supervision, because we need to get a better understanding of what the current direction is from the ministry in terms of students staying at school, because currently parents have had the option to pick up their children during certain curriculum expectations, whereas what we're reading now is that this could be a request for an exemption for the entire strand, and looking at what would happen for those students in terms of supervision during that strand of the curriculum.
And through you, Chair Drabens, to Trustee Reynolds, there is Superintendent Salmini, and if you'll recall the secondary, there is virtually no change at secondary from the 2015 curriculum. So they were doing that, they were utilizing that curriculum all along. But there are also some human rights considerations that we looked at in the last curriculum, and Superintendent Salmini's department's looking at that. We will bring back, once we've figured out what these exemptions mean, how we can do it, the human rights considerations, and it will be the choice of the board to either come to a committee of the whole with that information or back to the board meeting. And I'll talk to the chair and the vice chair as to what the best vehicle is for that. But some of the questions you may have tonight, we won't really have the answers, but we will.
As a follow-up to that, will there be any consideration or impact of finance? Is there any money coming towards our board to offset these, I want to say, new constructs of what's happening in the school? So are we expecting any new money that's going to help with supervision? What sort of supports could we anticipate coming along with this?
So as of right now, we know that there's some money coming for implementation of the curriculum, but we don't know of any monies coming in terms of any type of supervision.
I would hazard a guess that no new monies will be available for supervision.
So just to be clear, we are going to need to do more with less.
Not necessarily. This is what Superintendent Salmini's department is going to look at. We may have to make a decision to say we will not do one aspect of it because we're unable to do it. And that would be the aspect of supervising in the school. I mean, we can't add people. We have no staff to do it. We have no money to do it. So I'm not sure how that will work. But I don't want to say that definitively at this point because we're still working through it to see if it's possible. Obviously, we have to comply with what the Ministry of Education is and the curriculum. But we may find ourselves in a difficult spot, and we would come to this board to let them know what we're doing.
Trustee Gray.
Thank you, through the chair, and possibly to Superintendent Salimi and Hunt-Gibbons. I wonder if you could comment on how teachers are guided in the assessment of curriculum expectations when exemptions take place for certain strands of the curriculum?
Through the chair to Trustee Gray. So they are, if they are exempted from the curriculum, then they are not assessed or evaluated on that strand of the curriculum, and it's not reported on.
So it's not an expectation then that some assessment of some sort would take place for all strands of the curriculum?
In this particular case with these exemptions, it would be that they would be assessed on all other components of the health curriculum, but that there would be no kind of assessment or penalty for not completing this portion.
Vice Chair Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. If my memory serves me correctly, back when the 2015 revision came out, we committed to writing families a letter as a heads up before those strands are delivered in the classes. So I'm wondering if that's a practice that we will perhaps continue, and then with whatever comes out of the deliberations, whether a communications plan will be put in place just so we can let people know what's going on. And then lastly, the jargon around the announcements, I found it to be a little bit loose in terms of whether a policy is required, or the way we've been talking tonight, it's more of an operational procedure. So as a board, we wouldn't be expecting a policy then to come forward. So there's a few things in there. It's more of an operational procedure, if I understand correctly.
That's correct. So it is an operational procedure. The letters that you referred to are currently being updated with the new curriculum. So that is going to be a continued practice that prior to the strand being taught in each individual grade, families would receive that letter.
Trustee Garretts.
Through you, Chair, to Superintendent Salmini. I'm concerned about the cost of course, of supervision, if that's the case. But I'm wondering what the costs are going to be, or who will be creating the extra work for those students if they are staying back, giving them something to do. Who's creating that information? Who's passing it on to the kids?
Through the chair to Trustee Garrett. So my understanding would be if they stayed in the classroom, they would be working on other material work that they would be studying in that class. And so it would be the teacher in the classroom. But as Director Miller said, we're still working through all of the details, and we wouldn't even have, any idea of cost in terms of supervision or anything like that. So I can't really answer that at this time. But if they were staying in the school, the suggestion is that they would either stay in the classroom and work on existing work. What would be more problematic would be being supervised outside of the classroom by staff, because that's the piece that we're more concerned about.
Thank you. I just see that as more pressure on our staff.
Okay, there are no more speakers for this topic.
Thank you, Chair Drabant's only 10 more items to go. As trustees are aware, and probably in particular student trustee Burns and Lau are aware, this board, like all boards in this province, are experiencing some challenges around vaping on school property and in washrooms and in schools, actually. And we put out a letter to the community, to all parents prior to the beginning of the school about some of the practices that we will be doing with vaping. It's I don't know if you're aware, but they've identified a student in Illinois who has died as a result of vaping. So it is certainly a serious health issue and concern, and a public health issue. But I'll turn it over to Superintendent Podreberic to talk about where we are with, I guess, enforcement of.
We're certainly in the early stages. I mean, we put a letter to every parent, grade 7 and up. If silence is golden, we're pretty gold. It didn't spark a massive response. I've talked to a few parents around it, just clarifying some issues. In the cases we have heard from parents, are very thankful for it. They think they think it's much needed, and their experience with their kids was, we had no idea it was happening until it was happening. And that was our sense of what is happening, and we hear that time and time again from our schools when they do call home. Most cases, parents aren't aware that their kids have purchased a vape and are using it. So that's really the newness in this is there's a parent call. If a vape is confiscated, it will prompt a parent call to say, there's a vape here. If you'd like to pick it up, it will only be released to a parent with an information flyer, and likewise for a suspension for vaping. In the note will also become tips for parents as well, because we do see it as a homeschool connection piece as well as a big education piece. And so one of the enhancements is vaping in the new health curriculum, and we know schools will be jumping on that. And in our admin guide, which we introduced to trustees last spring, there is a course that we're asking all schools to go through, and so far it's been garnering quite a bit of positive feedback so far. So we think we're in the right in pushing this ethic. We know it's not a quick fix. There is no silver bullet or single approach, but we think this is a good step forward in us saying these are not welcome. And you'll see signs are going out to our schools. You'll see them in the next few weeks that say on the front entrances of schools, vapes and vape paraphernalia are not permitted on site. So we want to get that message out to kids that they're not yet welcome to even bring it to school. Now, will every kid listen? No, but we want to start there and get that word out and start a really core systemic prevention efforts around this to match our educational efforts.
We have one speaker. Trustee Oliver.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I was very pleased to see this email. It contains some very important stats and relevant information for our students and families. The email does refer to a code of conduct and talks about how students will be dealt with, and that students from whom vaping products have been confiscated from will receive a brochure, and the parents will receive a brochure as well. I'm just wondering, there is a promise of continued education through the health and physical education curriculum, and we do have wonderful partners with Halton Region Health Department. The vaping brochure, I'm wondering if we could extend that and in fact share it with all of our families and not wait for a student to be caught with vaping products, but kind of use more of a proactive prevention approach. And whether HDSB does that or Halton Region Health Department does that, I think that that would be beneficial to our students and their families. And also I wanted to remind us that in June, we had a great presentation from our Oakville Youth Council that talked about the issue of vaping, and they shared some of their own perspectives around how students are impacted by that, both those who vape and those who don't. And they had some thoughts around how to help with the prevention and management of this addictive substance and risky behavior. So I'm really looking forward to our staff and our partners in public health collaborating on this. And again, I'd like to suggest that that brochure be shared with all of our families.
Thank you. Through the chair to Trustee Oliver. Thanks for the suggestion. What we can do is I can take that back to the school ops group, and we can I certainly see the positives of it. We can just discuss some of the implications and get back to you. So we'll refer it to our broader group, but I'll bring it forward. Thank you.
Next item, I'm going to turn to executive office. It's actually going to be, I think, a trifecta of people, Superintendent Hunt Gibbons, Executive Officer McFadden, and Associate Director Bogue. But I will start it off. If you'll recall in the spring, there are a couple of elements to this. or three elements actually. In the spring, you'll recall, as we were doing our budgeting process, we lost $6.8 million to local priorities prior to entering into the budget process. And then, of course, the announcement that secondary schools would have to be staffed at 28-1, and junior and intermediate would increase by one student per class, which would obviously have financial budgetary implications for us in staffing. As a result, we declared 154 teachers at elementary and 154 teachers at secondary potentially redundant. We said at that time we were hopeful that most of their jobs would be returned, so to speak, and Executive Officer McFadden will speak about that. But in addition, we said one of the consequences of this increase in ratio of teacher-student would be possible cancellation of classes and possible increase of large class sizes at secondary. I want to remind trustees and the general public that this is very early days in the life of a secondary school. And we have some data. The data will likely change because we're only on day 2. And being a former secondary principal, and there's a few of us around this table, the first week and a bit of a school, there are many students in there changing classes. Many grade 12 students choose 8, knowing they're only going to take 6, and then they go in and they drop a couple. So we don't have the most accurate data at this time. And in our secondary schools, every teacher in every class will have a piece of paper in which they will be saying, or maybe they're doing electronically now, but they will have a paper that say students who are on your class list but who have not yet arrived, and students who have arrived in your class who are not on your class list, and they will be doing something like that, and then the school administration will be talking like that. You don't need to know all those details, and I don't think the public needs to know all those details, but what you do need to know is that we will provide you with some data tonight, but it needs to be taken with some caveats that we're in a fluid situation at least for the rest of this week and probably into the middle of next week as kids drop classes, add classes, swap classes, as we get our enrollment finalized, how many students we've actually here. As you'll know at the beginning, we had projected in our budget an increase of about 800 students to our board. That number may or may not change. And we said at the time, you never really know what the number is until the kids arrive. So I wanted to set it up like that. The last thing I would say is the Minister of Education announced in the summer that class average sizes was going from 22-1 at secondary to 22.5. And I'm sure for the trustees around the table, that posed some challenges for you with your constituents, and will continue to do so when their kids come home and they're in a class of 30-something. And they will say that, I thought we were at 22.5-1. So I'm going to turn it over to Executive Officer McFadden wants to talk at first to talk about the teachers and the callbacks and the 22-5. Then it'll go to Superintendent Hunt Timmins to talk about our class sizes, and then Associate Director Bogue sweeping up anything they've forgotten.
Thank you, Director Miller. Through the chair, I'll first talk about the aforementioned 154 elementary teachers and secondary teachers, the same number who were declared potentially redundant. We're very happy and pleased that we were able to recall all 154 elementary teachers to permanent work at their previous entitlement. So if they were full-time, they were recalled to full-time. If they were half-time, they were recalled to half-time, etc. All of that being permanent work. Of the 154 secondary teachers who were declared potentially redundant, we have recalled 134 of those teachers to their full entitlement. That could include permanent or long-term occasional work, or a combination of both. 16 of the 154 teachers have been recalled to a partial entitlement, so they are still owed some sections of work to be back at their full entitlement. 4 teachers were offered but did not accept any recall, and those 4 teachers are only are owed one section each. So they elected to stay on the supply teacher list, knowing that they could probably earn more money supply teaching full-time or half-time than they could by being recalled to one section. So we have offered all of those 154 teachers some work, and 134 are back fully at their entitlement, and 16 are back partially. Having said that, of course, those teachers, even the 134, aren't back permanently. And so our goal is to recall all of these teachers to permanent work. So there's approximately 20.84 FTE still owed to approximately 69 teachers. So 69 people are owed the equivalent of 20 teachers full-time equivalency. And we will work to get those teachers back into permanent work. But we're very happy that we've managed to get the majority back to the entitlement they held last year, meaning that they're earning the salary that they earned last year. We believe that as enrollment stabilizes and all of the other indicators that Director Miller talked about stabilize over the next 10 days to 2 weeks, we will be able to recall all of those teachers, hopefully many of them to permanent, but at least to long-term occasional work at their previous entitlement. As for non-teaching staff, all but one have been recalled to permanent work, and that individual is in a full year long-term occasional assignment in our PSSP union. So through the efforts of the HR staff over the summer, we have been able to manage to recall most of the potentially redundant staff. In terms of the announcement around class size and how it differed from the previous announcements of 28-1, the minister's announcement spoke about the average class size for September of 2019 being 22.5 across the province. That may be impacted by northern boards who have very small classes because they have very small schools, as do the French language boards and some of the Catholic boards. What we do know is that the regulation for class size has not changed since the April B08 memo, which talked about 22-1 moving to 28-1 over a 4-year period with attrition protection each year. So of late, the minister has been saying that the average class size is 22-1 plus attrition, which in our case brought our average class size to 24.85. So there has really been no change. I believe what the minister was commenting on was the impact of the changes for this September province-wide. But it has made no change to the way that boards are to staff. No additional funding came forward. The province's move to 28-1 over a 4-year period remains in effect. Okay, thank you. So just to reiterate a couple things that Director Miller has already touched upon. This is a very busy time of year in high schools. This year and every other year, we've had students come in and are changing schedules and having changed their minds about electives or having taken something through the summer, etc. So we've heard a lot recently about busy guidance offices and all the rest. Guidance offices are the busiest place in a school every year, all the time. It's just a fact of life in our high schools. We have been tracking and following the large class sizes because it is a concern based on the new staffing formula. Last week, prior to having students in the school, we had well over 100 classes that were sitting at 36 or greater students. But as was referenced earlier, it's about class cleanup and seeing the whites of students' eyes and counting bums in desks. And that number today, before coming into this meeting, has settled just below 100.
And that doesn't account for the splitting of classes yet. So we have sections posted that were released, and Deborah referenced that earlier this morning. So the release of the holdback, those positions are out, but they have not yet been operationalized as principals are in a hiring position. So the next time we're together at the board table, I'll share the number again, and the number would be significantly less based on the class cleanup that we've talked about, as well as the hiring of these teaching sections that are there, and splitting some of those large classes that we are looking to take care of. So 2 weeks from now, we'll have a different picture, and I'll report to you at that point.
And thanks, Executive Officer McFadden and Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons. You ticked off all the points, so Associate Director Bogue did not have to sweep up anything you missed. I would just say one thing to the Board of Trustees. Although it is fluid and we do have issues, and we're not sure how many large classes we had at this time last year because there was no need to figure it out, so we didn't. I would hazard a guess that we will have a significant number of larger class sizes. We don't know what the number is because they're still working out, but I think it's fair to say that we will have a fair number of large class sizes once we give you the accurate numbers in a couple of weeks. Okay.
Trustee Oliver?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I just wanted to revisit the update provided to us by Executive Officer McFadden, and thank you for that succinct summary. Just want to clarify the piece around the recent announcement by the Minister of Education. So we know that our principals in preparation for this September had to make some staffing changes, and some teachers had to be let go from the school based on their seniority, et cetera, in order to accommodate the class size and staffing levels. Does this new announcement change anything for those teachers? And does it change anything for our class sizing and staffing levels?
In short, no. The staffing that was done in the spring was based on the ministry's direction of April, which has not changed. Those teachers that were displaced as a result of the larger class size are the aforementioned 154 that were declared potentially redundant, who we are now recalling to permanent positions due to resignations, retirements, and into long-term positions due to leave of absence, et cetera. So no, there has been no change as a result of the announcement. Rather, that was a restating of the previous April directive, but was the minister commenting on what it looked like for September of 2019 provincially, but every board is reaching 28-1 at their own rate, depending on their rate of attrition.
Okay, seeing there's no more questions, I have a couple actually. So, and you mentioned that there were 100 classes that were 36 plus last week, and that number is dropping. My question is, would it be valuable to look at the past year to see what our future might look like? Like, are we expecting next year to have even more classes, and the year after that, even more classes that will be at that 36 plus level?
Sorry, through the chair to the chair. Yes, with the change in the staffing piece, we would expect that fewer staff members in the building results in larger classes. How large, we aren't able to say because, of course, that we have elective courses, we have courses across all pathways, we have an unequal number of students in our different pathways across Halton. So in terms of where the pressures are, that is something that will be evolving based on how quickly we get to that 28-1 over those years and what that might look like. But it is certainly something that we will be watching carefully and making decisions around in terms of offerings and just how we're doing business in our secondary schools, including e-learning.
And if I could just add to that, the minister has also made comments around the issue of class size being on the central bargaining table. So it will be subject to collective bargaining. So there may be some change to the class size initiative over the 4-year period as a result of that.
Okay. And my other question is, I know we have some sort of board caps for certain technology type courses, but do we have any issues with fire code for some of our classrooms at all?
Through you, Chair Gervens, most of our high school classrooms, from a building code point of view, can support having up to 30, 35 students. Many of our high schools have actually slightly larger classrooms with 2 doors, which means you can actually go even higher. I think the challenge we are going to find in some of our older schools is that the ventilation systems are not designed to handle 35 or 40 students for a prolonged period of time in a classroom. As long as the classroom has operable windows, that's one way to increase getting fresh air in the building. But that's probably going to be a little bit of a challenge. It certainly will be a bit of a challenge in portables.
Okay, we have another speaker on the speakers list. Thank you very much. Trustee Rocha.
Through you, Chair Gerbens, to Executive Director McFadden. We've discussed the class sizes at the secondary level. Can you give us a recap as to what the class averages or caps are at the elementary level?
Yes. There's been no change at the kindergarten level, and there's a dual class size that applies there. There's a class size maximum of 29 that can for 90% of our classes. There is a 10% of our classes are allowed to go beyond that, but only if on certain criteria. There's also a funding we're funded at, I believe, 26-1 for kindergarten. Is that correct? Yes. Thank you. So that's the dual parameter. In primary, grade 1 to 3, there's a primary class size cap of 20 for 90% of our classes, and 10% are allowed to flex over that to a maximum of 23. The average class size in junior intermediate has changed by 1 to be 24.5. In Halton, previously that was not a regulated number for the entire province, but every board had a class size maximum that applied to them based on where they were several years ago. The ministry was transitioning everyone to the same level, so we were all at different levels, and Halton was already at 24.5. So it was a funding change for us, but it didn't result in us having to change staffing. So those are the elementary class sizes.
Okay, that's the end of the speakers list.
The next topic is transportation, and I'm going to go to Superintendent Truffin, and we'll talk about, as you know, we sent letters. I don't know if we sent the letters home, but I believe we sent letters home to say that starting in September we would have buses outfitted with internal cameras. Superintendent Truffin will talk about that. Then I will turn it over to Superintendent Nagoy, who will talk about, you may have heard that the region of Halton had passed a motion supporting the use of external cameras to catch speeding drivers. That will not occur at this point, and Superintendent Nagoy will talk a little bit about that. And she'll also give you an update on our transportation, which is a good news story this time around. It's different than the last 2 or 3 years. And I'm going to preempt the trustees here because I understand we had a question around an appeal for busing. and she will clarify what that is, the appeal process. Okay, so Superintendent Truffin?
Yep, thank you, Director Miller, and to trustees. We, as you recall, in the spring, the CBC picked up on our initiative of putting or turning on video cameras on our buses, and the Information Privacy Commission caught wind of that news article, and they contacted both the Halton Catholic District School Board and the Halton District School Board, and we both, the Halton District School Board's Privacy Manager, Wes Roberts, and the Halton Catholic Privacy Manager are working currently with the IPC they have a number of questions. They want some data, they want some admin procedures, retention from the bus companies, they want contracts, and the IPC got back to us pretty quickly that they are recommending that we do not turn on the cameras at this time. So we are going to accommodate that request, and I want to stress that we are working jointly with the Halton Catholic District School Board on this initiative, and they're in agreement as well. So we're just going to be having a pause on turning these cameras on, and I know Communications is working on a communication to go home to our families later this week. Thank you, Superintendent Ito. So thank you.
And for the chair to all trustees, we did have a great start of the year in terms of transportation, so maybe I'll start there. We have a significant improvement in terms of our drivers. We did have 9 open routes, but they were all covered with spare drivers. There's a healthy supply of spare drivers and drivers in training. We continue to actively recruit. So there has been a very smooth start to the year, which is an improvement over the past few years. With regards to the stop arm cameras, there has been an initiative from the Halton Regional Police to have a pilot in the Halton region in terms of adding a stop arm camera on school buses in order to gather some data and in terms of blow-by vehicles and determine where to go in terms of enforcement from there. We are meeting with the sergeant that is heading this initiative next week jointly with the Catholic Board, the consortium, and the bus operators to get some information in terms of what they're proposing. And as we have more information, we'll bring that back to the trustees. And of course, will be discussed at the Board of Directors meeting as well at the consortium level. There was a question in terms of the appeal process for transportation. There is an appeal process for transportation, but it's for eligible students. So if a student is eligible for transportation in accordance with board policy and the distances and parameters that are approved in board policy, there is, of course, an option to appeal whether the stop is not safe or within safety distance of a major intersection or anything that has to do with safety. The policy is up on the consortium on haltonbus.ca on their website. There is no appeal process, however, for optional transportation. So that is board policy that determines the parameters of what is eligible for transportation.
I would just add that if a parent has a concern around the distance, we were asked a question around distance. If a parent has a concern, they can ask for a review of that distance calculation. I don't know how HSTS does the distance calculations, but they can ask for a review of it from HSTS as well. They just simply put it on writing. But again, it's the same thing. It's got to be a student eligible for busing. So, okay. Questions?
Okay, thank you very much. Trustee Rocha.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Corbens, to Superintendent Nagoy, just following up on Director Miller's point about how routes are calculated. Can you give us a brief overview on how those routes are calculated for eligible students?
Solely through you, Chair Corbens, Trustee Rocha.
we have eligibility criteria for elementary in terms of distance, 1.6 kilometer distance from school to home. It's like a map distance, so it's not a linear going through a creek. It's how they would have to walk on sidewalks, for example, or drive to school. So it's 1.6 for elementary, with some exceptions for the rural routes, where it could be a bit more or less depending on where the stop location could be for safety, and 3.2 kilometers for secondary students. If there is a dispute about the distance, that is an option to discuss with the consortium, and they go through the process. They can recalculate. If it's just on the edge, they will redo the calculation and inform the parent whether they're eligible or not.
Trustee Collard?
Thank you. I do believe it's been a number of years since we reviewed our transportation policy, and I'm wondering if we ought to perhaps start a review of the transportation policy at Committee of the Whole.
Vice Chair Harrison?
If it's the will of the group, I'll certainly add it to our agenda.
Do you require a motion, or is it something we can just add to the agenda?
I'm looking around the table. Is everybody okay with adding that? Anybody opposed? Okay. I believe it will likely be October.
That's everybody on the speaker's list for that topic.
Thank you. Back to Superintendent Truffin. This is a real good news story about the success of our Welcome Center. I know we had a presentation in the spring, but this is even better news now. So.
And thank you, Director. I'll be very quick, and we'll have another presentation this spring from our Welcome Center. I just did want to share, though, we had a very, very busy summer at the Welcome Center. We are open every day. However, it's the last few weeks that really the magic happens at the Welcome Center. More than 600 families were registered, assessed, and welcomed, and got prepared for the first day of school this week. So they worked really hard and helping many, many families feel welcome to our country.
And in case the public is watching, those thousands of people, we need to remind them that the Welcome Center welcomes children and families new to this country. So they're new Canadians. Okay, I should have included this in the staffing. You may have heard stories, and I know the public has had some concerns about our French teacher, and in the province there is a shortage of French teachers. So we've been heavily trying to recruit French teachers over the summer, and actually from the spring into the summer. So I'll turn it over to Executive Officer McFadden, tell you where we are with it.
Yes, we currently have approximately 10 long-term occasional French vacancies, and in the elementary panel, and 4 part-time vacancies that are permanent that add up to about 1.1 FTE. Permanent vacancies. So this is something that we're monitoring on a daily basis. We have postings out right now, and we are actively reaching out to the French qualified teachers on our long-term occasional list and our daily occasional list to inquire whether they are interested in taking any of these positions. We'll be monitoring this daily, and we have some ideas of strategies to get qualified French teachers in those positions if they aren't filled through the posting process.
I'm going to turn it to Superintendent Puccetti. She has already sent out to you, but as you know, the summer is busy construction month for school boards. So I don't know if she wants to talk about it, or you just want to have people ask questions around our capital renewal projects and where we all are on those, and particularly in the schools in your wards or areas, I should say.
Trustee Daniele.
sure I got to set up my microphone. I haven't used it today. I have a question about Milton District High School. The library closed due to water damage resulting from roof work, cleanup and book replacement underway. I was wondering if we had a time frame on that and was it covered by insurance? And the science rooms that can be used, is the science room, is that a result of the fire that was there? Is that room finally up and ready, or is it a different room?
Thank you. Through the chair to Trustee Daniele. We're working quickly to replace those books. We only received the list of books today. We're in negotiations with the roofing contractor to figure out how to get reimbursement so that we can reorder those books. So all of that is in process currently. And I believe the science labs, that is a separate science lab upgrade project, not related to the rooms that were damaged by the fire. But I'm actually looking at, yes, thank you. Superintendent Newton is just nodding to say yes.
As a follow-up, could I have an update on those rooms that were damaged by the fire? Because last I heard in the spring, they weren't usable yet. I haven't inquired since then, but it had been quite some time since the fire.
And through the chair to Trustee Daniele, those rooms that were damaged in the wing, which were traditionally the tech wing, have been beautified by Maya and Michael Wallafant's team. Unbelievable. So they were opened in the spring. And it's a beautiful hallway of 3 interconnected rooms, which are used for high technology, and included in there are a number of technology pieces that Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons and Superintendent Michelli has been working on an AP to bring in innovative technology in that area as well. So we're really excited, and they have been used very much in an open space concept as well. So it's beautiful.
Thank you for that update. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Trustee Garretts.
You know what I'm going to ask. Firstly, I'd like to ask about the new high school in Milton and get an update on where we're at with that. And also, my second question is, I've been asked by a parent, a Viola Desmond parent, there still seems to be some outdoor construction. I drove by there the other day, and there's still diggers and ground torn up, et cetera, et cetera. Just wondering what the update on that is.
Thank you. Through the chair to Trustee Garrett. So we will be bringing a report back to board on September 18th, recommending the award of the contract for Milton District High School. We are still finalizing some of the building permits aspects with the town of Milton, but I think we'll have that resolved. So that's good news. And for Viola Desmond, yes, we are still getting some work done. I believe there are still some sidewalks that need to be done. But we have been working with the principal to make sure that it's safe access to the building. It's a lot of kids coming to the building, so we are also going to approach the town of Milton to look at some possible safety enhancements, better crossing indications, perhaps a crossing guard, because there are actually a fair amount of kids, thank goodness, being walked to that school. So I will try to provide you with a little bit more detail, a little bit more update. It's still early days. We're still trying to figure all of that out.
And to add to that, through the chair, to Trustee Garrett's, the Mighty Machines that are located right outside the kindergarten room are offering great curriculum links. Teachers have been using that as an opportunity. You can't ride on the machine and you can't have your picture taken on the machine, but certainly by the machine. So we are trying to, you're trying to make a positive piece to it, but they're close to over 1,100 students at Viola Desmond, and that's 1 year, and actually they didn't get occupation until January of last year. So clearly the community loves that school. Sidewalks are being built, and again, Maya's team's doing a phenomenal job. The town itself in Milton is making that park land accessible. They are working on it to make that accessible. So we will be talking with the town about, can we please start to use some of that parkland once we get going as well. So we're doing what we can.
And with that, I'd just like to do a quick follow-up for the town of Milton, because I know that over the Labor Day weekend, they were in disarray around Craig Kilberger School, and there was some sidewalks, et cetera, dug up, and they put the pressure on the crew and got that all ready and ready to go for the first day of school. So that was awesome. And I know that the town of Milton is working very, very hard to get that park beside the school ready to go. And I think it's full steam ahead, and I see there's gazebos built already, et cetera. So it's looking good, but clearly it won't be ready for the fall, but maybe the spring.
No other speakers on the list?
Okay. Sorry, guys, there's still 3 more items on this. The next one, I'm hoping that this will be quick. If you'll recall, the current contract of the unions expired August 31st, 2019. That means the previous contract was expired, I believe, in 2014 or 2015. Yeah, so 14, yeah, because this was an extension. So during that time, particularly in our secondary schools, it included some elementary schools, there was at one point work to rule. And some sports activities were not occurring and extracurriculars were not occurring in some of our secondary schools and in some of our elementary, but it was really primarily secondary school. And we had a procedure on how community members could be coaches, et cetera, and so on. But it's pretty restrictive in what it can do, because we have high-risk sports and we have low-risk sports, and high-risk sports absolutely need a staff member with them. And if it's worked the rule, how can we do this? We've been approached by a couple of organizations in case there is labor disruption this time as a result of contracts expiring. We have no, and I want to emphasize, no indication there is going to be any labor disruptions or anything like that. But we are rescinding that previous admin procedure, which developed a process on which could allow community coaches to coach our teams. However, the rules of the game have changed in terms of OFIA, our liability, and OSB Insurance has some real concerns around those things. So we are redoing the admin procedure around that. But I will be 100% honest here with you. It's unlikely, in fact, it's probably zero chance that a community coach could coach a high-risk sport, which are things like football, hockey, without a staff member there. Am I correct with that, Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons? Yeah. So our new admin procedure will reflect that, because we have been approached by some associations wanting to be a bit proactive, and good on them to try to do it. The challenge will be we will be unable to do it because there's a liability and issue for us as a board, and we obviously can't put the board at risk. So, okay, so we'll bring that new admin procedure once it's written. To all trustees, over the last week, and some trustees have commented to me or commented to us, Waterloo District School Board and the Toronto District School Board have announced that they are, and Thames Valley too, that they are addressing what's called period poverty, and that's for the public, if they don't know, that's to provide feminine hygiene products for students who have economic challenges. And I had incorrectly said to our board that we were already doing this. We were already doing it, but that ended as of the end of 2018 because of supply. We had a teacher who was heading it up. Her name is Milana Trojanovic, and it was called End Period Poverty, and there was an article about her in the paper. But that doesn't mean we're not doing a lot of things to support young women in our board. So I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Salmini and Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons to explain what we are currently doing and what we are going to look into.
Through the chair to the trustee, so I can start with elementary. So we do have products available for students in elementary schools, either through the phys ed office or through the front office that are free of charge if students need to access them. So that's our current practice. We also do speak to kids in health class about changes and about personal care, and also really try to teach them how they can access support in the school around managing this in school, as well as in accessing products. So that would be our current practice in elementary.
Thank you. Similarly, in secondary school, there are free products always available in the main office and in the phys ed office, and students are aware that they can go there at any time. The difference in secondary is that the vast majority of the girls' bathrooms also have for purchase dispenser machines on the wall for a nominal charge, 25 cents, etc. So similarities between both, and yet the difference in terms of when the machine is. Where do those products come from? They come from a variety of places. There are organizations that provide for free, including not just the corporations, but also OFIA to the elementary. When you ask for elementary educational resources, you get sample products as well. And for the most part, this is how our schools have had products on hand.
The Superintendent Hunt Gibbons has had her IPL, Rebecca Richardson. She has been contacting OFIA and talking to TDSB and Waterloo District School Board as to what else we may be able to do. So,
Do you have a speaker, Trustee Oliver?
Thank you. Through your chair, to Superintendent Hunt Gibbons. I like the idea of the products being available through the phys ed office or some designated location. I question the offering through the main office. It seems to me like that might pose a bit of a barrier because the student has to come in and ask, or is it that the products are set aside somewhere and the students know where to go?
Through the chair to Trustee Oliver, every school is different. The main office, one of the reasons why it has always been a point of contact is, of course, that for the vast majority of our schools, our secretarial staff is female. And so whether one school has things set aside or another, you're approached by a bunch of women in the office. The relationships are really what's key. And I'm sure Superintendent Salmini would be saying that part of the teaching is the teaching of sisterhood and the teaching of support for one another and the ability to advocate for oneself and to ask for help when one needs it in any way. And the front office is very much part of the school and should be seen as a very welcoming and warm place, regardless of why you happen to be there.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate hearing that caring concept and that relationship building piece. Thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
And just to add in that we really want to teach kids that this is a normal part of life and to normalize this part. So as they would access help and support for anything else at school, we want them to know that it's the same thing. It's not something that they should be feeling any shame or discomfort around.
Trustee Lau.
Through the chair to Trustee Hunt Gibbons, Superintendent Hunt Gibbons. I haven't seen a dispenser at my school, White Oak Secondary School. I was just wondering, I have two questions. The first, how many dispensers per school or per bathroom? Do you have a number on that? And secondly, how are administrators communicating to students that these products are available? Because I don't think in grade 9 or in grade 10, I've been told that they were available at the front office. Yeah.
Through the chair to our newest trustee. Every school is different. So in terms of an inventory of what's in current bathrooms and schools, since the latest announcement came out, we've been trying to gather some information to see where deficiencies are and what our current state is at this point.
your grade 9 compulsory phys ed class, which included the component on health, should have been making it very clear to all of the young women taking the course just exactly where they might find products if they were in need, inclusive of handing them out. So we know we have some education to do and we're collecting some information, but certainly this is something we would like to support, and I think talking about it is the first step.
Okay, seeing no other questions, I have a question. I just, from an equity perspective, for students that are transgender, having them available in public places may not be very comfortable, like not public as in public, but having to ask at an office or something like that may be quite uncomfortable, and it would be far better to just have them available in an inclusive bathroom, washrooms and things like that, so that there's not always this. And the other point I just want to make is that we across the country there is very much a movement to allow for feminine products to be available in public spaces. If you go to Halifax, their library, et cetera, does that. And when we force women to have to go out of their way to be able to access these products, especially when they get their period, when they're not expecting it, or the whole point of not being able to afford it, it does put up barriers. It takes time out of their school day to be able to go and access this stuff and then find a washroom and then do what they need to do. I strongly feel that we should move towards making these products freely accessible in the places where they're needed, kind of as soon as possible. And I know that there's cost issues, but I'm hoping that we can overcome that barrier. Vice Chair Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, and further to the points that you were making, I believe in the media around the TDSB initiative, they spoke about, through OFIA, it being free of cost, putting the dispensers in the bathrooms and so on. So I was wondering, I heard you say that that was being investigated as well. So I just wonder whether through the director we can hear a report on the outcome of that investigation at the next meeting, because I do believe, I think I wrote in an email, when I was that age, I would have rather eaten rotten tomatoes and done extra homework than, go to an adult, no matter how much I liked them, and ask for a product. So I am aligned with what Chair Grabentz said. Yeah.
Through you, Chair Grabentz, to Trustee L. Harrison, Vice Chair L. Harrison, we will bring that back once we've completed it. I don't know if it'll be the next board meeting, no. And because we're not sure exactly how the TDSB or the Waterloo Board or the Thames Valley Board is doing this, because it is a significant cost. And to be quite honest, it's hard for us to imagine that OFIA will be providing these products free of charge forever. And we need to investigate that part of it. Is it a resource package that young women are given? And so we need to find that out, because it would be a significant cost. And then is the TDSB and those boards attaching budget money to it as well? We don't quite know all that, but we will know it, and we'll come back to the board whenever we have it. So I don't want to guarantee the next board meeting, but when we have it, we'll bring it. As I'm looking at Superintendent Hunt, Gibbons, and Saul Mini, that's, yeah? Okay.
Trustee Collard.
Thank you. I just have to wonder if the product manufacturers might not find that this was a wonderful way to reach back to the community and ensure that young women have the products that they need at hand when needed, without having to be embarrassed or humiliated. which is quite often the case, especially for young women. It's good business practice for them to provide these products, and I'm wondering if there's a way of reaching out.
Through the chair to Trustee Collard. I'm sure the corporations right now are finding themselves in the spotlight given the publicity on this, but to their credit, they have in the past been the ones who have been donating the product, and I guess specific to their own budgets, they've been doing this on an annual basis. So some years you hear of one company that's provided, over $1 million in free product in Ontario, and the next year they shine the light, it's another company that's doing this, because I'm sure their own budgetary constraints and the ups and downs of their corporate world are driving it. But I could imagine that they're all under a little bit more pressure these days.
Trustee Lau.
Last week on Monday, I spoke to Sarah Chun, who is the president of the Ostago Public Board Council. She's the student trustee for Thames Valley that you were speaking about. And she told me that for her board of 78,000 students, it costs them $45,000 a year for all the products. And then I think that the donations from Toronto District School Board, there was a company that also completely sponsored them as well, so it didn't come out of their budget. So that was just something I wanted to add.
Thank you, Trustee Lau. Yeah, we are aware of those. What we don't know is how long are these relationships and these arrangements for? Are they for a year, or are they for just a certain amount of time and so on? So we need to investigate that. I'm a little, I don't know if concerned is the right word, but in terms of equity in the province, if we have some companies only supporting one board, that would be a bit of an issue. I'm sure in some of our northern boards, this is a far more significant problem than that doesn't sound fair, but I think you understand my meaning, that it's a big, big issue in some of the northern boards where poverty is a little greater. And so, but we're certainly going to get to the bottom of it and where the budgets come from, if they're paying and all that other stuff.
There are no more speakers on this list.
Okay, and the last item I have, and I don't think I will look to the guidance of Vice Chair Al Harrison and Chair Grabentz on this. As trustees are aware, this is a multi-year planning year. Our new multi-year plan or strategic plan will be implemented for September 2020. But the building of that strategic plan occurs this year. And the current plan we're in, we didn't actually really get started until around November of December of that year, which was 2015. We want to get out the gate a little sooner. We also expressed some concerns that we probably could do a better job in consulting with our stakeholders, the broader community, divergent groups, and I think we had some gaps in the last time, and I think the trustees that were on that group will agree that we had some gaps around that. And so as a consequence, this Board of Trustees supported the tendering of, or an RFP for a process to find a consulting firm that would help us do that and do the outreach and go to stakeholders and so on. And the successful bidder on that is a group called Maximum City. And they've got some pretty extensive experience working in school boards and doing this outreach and working with different groups and bringing them in and running focus groups and all sorts of other stuff. We want to get started fairly quickly, and we think it's important, noting that the multi-year plan is really the trustees' plan. This is the Board of Trustees' strategic plan. It's not the staff. Our role is to implement. Of course, we're involved in the development of it, but it is the plan of this board to develop it. So we have set up a meeting next week with Maximum City to talk about process. And so we would like to have a steering committee of 3 or 4 trustees and 3 or 4 senior staff to talk about process with Maximum City, not to talk about the plan, to talk about the process. And I know this is not a forum to figure out who those people are. And I will, like I said, I will look to the guidance of Vice Chair Al Harrison and Chair Gerbens. And I imagine that there's quite a bit of interest by the Board of Trustees to be involved, certainly in the development of strategic plan. That's a given. But whether that extends to being on the steering committee, I don't know. So Dave, Associate Director Bogue has put down a timeline and kind of built up a thing. It's all pretty malleable at this point because you guys haven't seen it and you haven't had your input, but we thought it was a framework to start from. Let's start from a point. Here's a point to start. And that meeting with Maximum City, we'd like to get started, and we'd like to do it next week. But if trustees need time to figure out your process to determine who's going to be on the steering committee, we can go back to them and say, let's move on that meeting. Just in the ideal world, we'd want to get started on this, so we get our plans. David, do you have anything you want to add to that? No? Okay, so I'll leave it there.
Can I suggest that anybody who's interested in being on the steering committee, that you send me an email. I'll send you any information I have about the sort of timelines for that steering committee. Do you have any dates or anything already set up?
Yeah.
And I'll send that out too, because people's own schedules may conflict with some of the dates already in place.
We can certainly share the timeline that was shared last spring. It's been modified a little bit because of this new consultant that's involved. And I can also share for trustees the details that the consultant provided for us so that you get a sense of what their process is. And that'll be part of what they'll want to talk about at that steering committee meeting, is just to talk about tweaking what they had suggested to us as a process.
Okay. So if there is if there are more people who are interested than are needed on the team, we will probably be drawing randomly. Okay? Okay, so that was your last.
And that's the world's longest director's report. Thank you for bearing with us. Hopefully that's the last of any real long ones. But as I said at the outset, it is the beginning of a school year. There's a lot of issues that are of interest to the public, given the climate we're currently in. So thank you, everybody, for bearing with us.
Okay, well, before you end that thought, Vice Chair Harrison has something to say.
Oh.
Sorry. Thanks. Through you, Madam Chair. My question is just that in the email that you send out, is it possible to include kind of the expectation? I know that we're just hearing about this tonight as well, but if we could include some information about what the expectations and the scope of work of the steering committee are, in order to kind of make that differentiation between what the steering committee is guiding and the substantive input that trustees will, like, no doubt want to be giving around the development of the multi-year plan. Okay, thanks.
Okay, now it's communications from the chair. So to all the students and staff, welcome back. I hope the summer break was refreshing and recharging, and that you're all ready and raring to go. We certainly had a really nice summer this summer. And probably many of the trustees around the table are thankful that we didn't have an election and other things that have taken time during the summer, and we got to actually enjoy it. So I was happy to see that there were tons of people walking, riding, and scootering to school on Tuesday. I'm sure a lot of you saw that in your communities. And I'm hoping that that is kept up. The weather is still great and perfect for some active transportation. And many people overestimate the time it takes kids to walk or ride to school, and there is a new web app available at everymetercounts.ca that was actually, the HDSB was part of the development team for making that web app. So it shows approximately how long it will take to get to school by foot or by pedal power. And it's pretty cool, and I really suggest that everybody check it out. And Vice Chair Harrison mentioned during our closed session that it's International Day of Charity today. And so I wanted to also point out just a couple of things. The Halton Learning Foundation is always seeking donations, but of course seeking donations to help defray school year startup costs for students that need help. And so please visit haltonlearningfoundation.ca to learn more and to donate. And the Halton Food for Thought, which is a charity that keeps many breakfast programs viable within our board, is seeking teammates for the Scotiabank Toronto Waterfront Marathon. Monies raised goes back to the charity, and they have 5K, half and full marathons, and more information is available through haltonfoodforthought.com. So and down to some administrative stuff. The fundraising governance policy, which was approved just last year, has been reviewed by Superintendent Nagoya, and she says that there are no changes required other than a review date change to 2021 and some references she believes that will be added. So we're not going to bring that to the table for those very small things. And also, during the summer months, meetings were held with a number of local MPPs, Jane McKenna, Effie Triantafilopoulos, and Ted Arnott. And a meeting is scheduled this Friday with MPP Crawford. And we also have a meeting request in for MPP Gill. And the agenda of the meetings are about funding reductions and program changes, and to reiterate our Halton-wide consultation results on class size and e-learning. So we are still working to get that message to our government about what the parents and community members in Halton feel about those changes. So other than that, just speaking on behalf of all the trustees, I'm sure we all wish everybody a successful and wonderful school year. Oh, okay.
That's big news. Yeah.
Bianca Andrescu, did I say that right?
She's in the semis.
She's in the semis, the U.S. Open.
Cool.
That's pretty awesome. Okay, so we are now on to committee reports. Trustee Gray.
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to let the trustees know that we had some nominations over the summer months for teachers to receive an Inspire Award. Information has just flowed right to me today, actually, from Susan Thrasher, and so I will be forwarding out an email tomorrow to let everyone know about the time frame for the recognition of the evaluation and then subsequent recognition of the successful nominees. So watch for work coming your way soon.
Trustee Shuttleworth.
Thank you. Through the chair, this really isn't a committee, but it was just a review of the conference that myself, Trustee Oliver, Trustee Collard, Trustee Gray, Trustee Donnelly, and Trustee Rocha went to in July, which was the OPSPA AGM and the CSBA conference. It was by far the best conference I think I have been to in my short term as a trustee so far. But I took quite a few notes of key things that they said, and I just wanted to, I've sent a review that could be added to the online agenda, please. But I do have a couple of quotes I just wanted to kind of start the year with because I think they're quite relevant to what we do here. On the first day of the conference, we listened to Speaker Kevin Lamoureux, who is from Winnipeg. And what he spoke of was sort of the general theme of, even though we don't create the problem, we want to be part of the solution. I found that was quite a strong message to send out. We then had Dr. Gabor Mate, who spoke about the relationships that students have with teachers and parents. And one of the messages that he sent out, which I thought was quite good, was to be curious, you must be vulnerable, as you have to admit you don't know. And then finally, my last little message was from Brian Woodland, who used to work here in Halton, but is now, or was in Peel, who is a friend of Trustee Grace. And what he said, which I think is an overall great message for us, which is, it is our job to stand up for what's not popular, but for what is right. So I thought those were 3 key messages to start the year off on a good term. Thank you.
Very nice. Okay, Vice Chair Harrison.
Thank you. And through you, Chair Gerbentz, Committee of the Whole is coming up next Wednesday, so we're getting back into the swing of things. On the agenda, City of Burlington Transit passes for students, and I understand that the Mayor of Burlington is planning to be here.
Yeah, she's going to have a short presentation on municipal transit.
So that's a heads up. That's kind of evolving, and just so our staff are aware, and if you can let me know if you're able to be here.
Myself and Superintendent Nagoy will be here for sure.
Okay.
And Associate Director Bulk.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we will be having updates from all of, that's scheduled for an hour. The next hour will be the subcommittee updates. I understand the subcommittee, you know what I mean, that have been meeting and working, just updates around that work and input from all of the trustees. Trustee Rocha raised the next item, which is related to PIC sessions and trustees being invited and or the roles of trustees at PIC sessions. Do you remember raising that? Okay, so you'll be up then. There is the trustee criminal reference check that was raised by Trustee Collard, yes, and Trustee Shuttleworth. So if you could be ready to speak to those items, that would be great. And then lastly, we'll have a DPR session to kick things off for this season. Just a reminder that September 23rd will be the DISC session, the much long awaited. And then for October, just a heads up that our committee meeting is October 23rd in recognition of a holiday observance on the second Wednesday.
Okay, and that's all for committee reports. Now we're up to trustee questions and, hold on a second, questions and comments. Okay, there we go. Trustee Collard.
Thank you. Yesterday I received an email from a concerned parent about traffic safety, and it wasn't the typical email. It wasn't talking about how drivers need to be more careful. It was talking about the personal responsibility of students to understand and obey traffic laws, to not cross in the middle of the street, to look both ways, to use common courtesy, and to be aware of their surroundings. And his plea was for some partnership between the police force and the schools to ensure that students are learning the proper way to cross the street and to be aware as they're passing through driveways that cars may be entering and exiting. And so I was wondering if the director wanted to speak to that.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Gerbentz, to Trustee Collard. Associate Director Bogue is going to respond.
Couple responses, I think, to that question. One would be in terms of certainly around parking lot safety and safety on the school property. I know our schools do some education with kids and parents in terms of what are the safe routines for arrival and dismissal times and those kinds of things. In terms of more general safety, and I think you were alluding to this, Trustee Collard, in terms of when kids are on their way to school, to and from, and those kinds of things, that does happen through the health and physical ed curriculum, right, starting from kindergarten on. And so things like street sign, rules of the road, wearing seat belts, the whole bicycle and bicycle helmets, facing traffic, if you're walking on the road, which side you should be walking on. So those kinds of things are covered within the physical and health education curriculum. So those are happening. And, we'd certainly be open to hearing what the police may be suggesting as well. But
thank you very much.
Vice Chair Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I have 2 points. One builds on what Trustee Collard and Associate Director Bogue were just talking about. And on the first day of school, I cycle a lot, and I try to do a little bike around, and I can tell you that I almost became a hood ornament on day one, a driver, so it's kind of a complimentary message to what Trustee Collard was talking about. And one of the recent studies that has come out is that, you know, when we're talking to the community and to students, we're telling them about statistics and the reasons, the very logical reasons why they should and should not do something. But this research showed that the more impactful messages are ones that are personal anecdotes of how I almost became a hood ornament, for example, to really kind of reach into people's hearts and minds and have some transformative learning. So it's my hope that we can sort of explore different ways of delivering these messages, because while it would be one thing if I got hit, it would be another if it was a kid with a long life ahead of them. So hopefully I have one of those too, but anyway. Okay, so that's thing number one. Item number two is an email that I received around equitable fundraising in schools, and this is something that's come up previously. Some of our schools have the ability to raise thousands and thousands of dollars through their homes and schools and through their school councils and student councils, while others don't, and it creates a have and have not situation. I know it's tricky equity question. So I was wondering, we have our PIC committee that it's a parent involvement committee. I wonder if that's a question that Superintendent Pennyfather would be willing to raise with that group to try and get some, I guess, sentiments and maybe approaches around, if at all, around that topic.
I think it's a great idea. We usually have a discussion at our first session on what they're doing to activate their communities. So I think this could be very much be a part of that.
Okay. Well, there are no more speakers on the list. We have exhausted our agenda, and I declare this meeting adjourned. Hold on a second. Okay, so
so during private session, we talked about going back into private to talk about an item, but we don't need to do that because OPSPA is developing perhaps some information that can assist in that process. So we're free.
So we are actually adjourning. Thank you very much. Let's do a motion to adjourn. Is there one in here?
Yes, there is.
Excellent.
You know what? Jean hasn't made a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
At least 2 months.
I need a motion to adjourn. Oh, Trustee Gray.
Seconded by.
Seconded by Trustee Rocha. Oh, okay.
Thirded by.
And I'm sure all in favor.
All in favor? You can go ahead and use your. Trustee Gray, could you vote?
Ladies, the meeting isn't over yet. Till the vote's held.
That passes, but not unanimously.
We'll assume Kelly.
No, I voted no.
Well, Tracy.
And I didn't need to.